Welcome back to the Nightmare Zoo. We look at a map and see blue lines for lakes, green patches for forests, and we think, that's just nature. But nature isn't a postcard. Nature is a slaughterhouse, and we are just livestock that forgot how to be afraid. Tonight we are opening 3 highly classified files. 3 locations where the authorities looked at the carnage, looked at the survivors, and decided to lie to the public. From the freezing black depths of the Great Lakes, to the flooded coal mines of Ohio, to the deep, unforgiving boreal woods of the Canadian border. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because the things in these files are still out there. Lock your doors. Let's look at what they're hiding. Story 1. Something very strange is happening in the Great Lakes. If your picture of the Great Lakes is summer beaches and cargo ships, that's the shoreline. Get out onto the open water of Lake Superior in late November, when the gales come and the water temperature drops to 34 degrees and you're in a different world entirely. It's a freezing, black, bottomless abyss that doesn't care if you live or die. The man in this account, we'll call him Elias, was the captain of a DNR fisheries patrol boat, a 30-foot aluminum hull designed to check netting and monitor invasive species. He'd been on the Superior for 20 years. He knew the weather, he knew the currents, and he knew when to turn back. It started on a Tuesday night in mid-November. Elias and his deckhand, a young guy named Miller, were running back to the marina near Grand Marais. The fog was so thick it felt like driving through wet wool. The lake was dead calm, which in November is the worst kind of calm. At 2:00 a.m. the sonar started pinging. Elias looked at the screen. There was a massive contact directly beneath them, coming up from 300 feet down. It wasn't a school of fish. It was a single, solid mass, and it was rising fast. "Shut the engines off," Elias whispered, killing the cabin lights. The boat drifted in the fog. The sonar pinged again. The contact was 50 feet down, then 30, then 10. Then something bumped the hull. It wasn't a gentle bump. It was a massive, deliberate impact that threw Miller off his feet and sent the coffee mugs crashing to the deck. The aluminum hull groaned, the metal actually denting inward. Miller grabbed a high-lumen spotlight and rushed to the starboard gunwale, shining it down into the black water. Breaking the surface wasn't a sturgeon. It wasn't a lake sturgeon. It was a hand. But it was the size of a manhole cover, pale, translucent, and covered in thick, gelatinous webbing. The fingers were 7 feet long, ending in black, hooked claws that were currently dug into the aluminum hull, peeling the metal back like tin foil. Before Miller could yell, the thing pulled itself up over the rail. I need to be clear about what Elias saw because this is where the story becomes a slaughter. The creature was a nightmare of deep-water anatomy. It was at least 9 feet long, but it was impossibly bloated. Its skin was a sickly, translucent white, pulsing with black veins. It had no eyes, just a smooth, bulbous head with a mouth that unhinged to reveal 4 concentric rings of backward-curving, translucent teeth. It smelled like rotting fish and ancient, stagnant ice. It lunged at Miller. Miller raised his heavy steel boat hook and swung it at the thing's head. The creature didn't even flinch. Its massive, webbed hand shot out and clamped around Miller's waist. The grip strength was hydraulic. Elias heard the wet, heavy crunch of Miller's pelvis shattering into powder. Miller didn't even have time to scream before the creature jerked him forward. Its concentric jaws clamped over Miller's right shoulder. The teeth sheared through his heavy winter coat, his Kevlar vest, and the flesh underneath in a single sickening bite. Arterial blood sprayed across the deck, hot and thick, hissing as it hit the freezing aluminum. The creature twisted its massive head. The sound of Miller's arm tearing away from the socket was a wet, heavy rip. Elias didn't think. He grabbed the emergency flare gun from the dash, aimed directly at the creature's eyeless face, and pulled the trigger. The magnesium flare hit the creature in the mouth and ignited. It burned at 4,000 degrees. The thing let out a shriek that sounded like a drowning whale, dropping Miller's severed arm and thrashing backward. It slipped off the gunwale, taking a massive chunk of the aluminum railing with it, and plunged back into the black water. Elias grabbed Miller, who was bleeding out from his shoulder and his crushed pelvis, and shoved him into the cabin. He fired up the engines and ran the boat at full throttle back to the marina. Miller survived, but he lost the arm, and he can never walk without a cane. When the Coast Guard and DNR went back to the spot the next day, they found nothing. The official report stated that Miller was injured when he slipped on the icy deck and fell into the winch cable, crushing his pelvis and severing his arm. Elias looked at the peeled-back aluminum rail. He looked at the massive gelatinous handprint left in the blood on the deck. He signed the NDA. He still patrols the lakes, but he never goes out after dark, and he never, ever turns off his sonar. Story 2. Ohio's Wayne National Forest hides a terrifying secret. Let's leave the freezing water of the lakes and head down into the suffocating, humid dark of the Wayne National Forest in southeastern Ohio. If you think Ohio is flat farmland, you haven't been to the southeast corner. It's Appalachian foothills, steep, narrow hollows, and a century of abandoned, flooded coal strip mines. The water in those mines is highly acidic, pitch black, and hides everything. Our ranger is Silas. Silas was a law enforcement ranger for the Wayne. He'd spent 18 years chasing illegal dumpers and pulling ATVs out of the mud. He knew the hollows the way a coyote knows a den. In late August, a pair of amateur cavers went missing near an old, flooded high-wall mine known as the Black Rock Pit. Silas and a local volunteer tracker named Boone hiked in to look for them. The humidity was at 100%. The air was dead still. They reached the Black Rock Pit at noon. It was a massive, sheer cliff of blasted sandstone dropping 50 feet down into a pool of black, acidic water. Silas told Boone to stay on the ridge while he climbed down the scree slope to check the water line. The deeper he got, the colder it became. The smell hit him first. It didn't smell like mine runoff. It smelled like raw sewage, wet dog fur, and copper. Silas clicked on his high-lumen flashlight and swept the beam across the black water. 50 yards out, the water began to bubble. Out of the black muck, a head emerged. It was pale, completely hairless, and covered in thick, leathery folds of skin. It had no eyes, just smooth, sunken indentations. Its jaw was elongated, hanging slack, revealing rows of needle-like, translucent teeth. Before Silas could raise his radio, the thing moved. It didn't swim. It propelled itself through the water with massive webbed forelimbs, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Silas scrambled up the scree slope, slipping on the loose rock. He reached the top, gasping for air, and looked down. The thing had pulled itself onto the rocky shore. It was at least 7 feet long, its body emaciated but heavily muscled. It was sniffing the air, its blind head twitching. Then Boone made a fatal mistake. Boone, trying to get a better look from the ridge above, stepped on a loose patch of shale. The rock gave way, and Boone slid down the 50-foot embankment, crashing into the shallow water at the base of the pit, right next to the creature. The thing didn't hesitate. It dropped onto all fours and lunged. I need to be clear about what happened next because this is the part Silas sees every time he closes his eyes. The creature didn't just bite Boone. It clamped its jaws over Boone's right thigh. The needle teeth sheared through his denim jeans and into the muscle. Boone screamed, a high, wet sound, and drew his hunting knife, stabbing it repeatedly into the creature's neck. Black, foul-smelling ichor sprayed from the wounds, but the creature didn't let go. Instead, it twisted its massive head. The sound of Boone's femur snapping was like a rifle shot echoing off the sandstone walls. Boone's scream turned into a gurgling sob as the creature began to shake him, tearing the muscle from the bone. Silas drew his .44 Magnum and fired. The heavy slug hit the creature in the shoulder, blowing a hole the size of a fist through the pale flesh. The creature thrashed, dropping Boone's ruined leg, and turned its eyeless face toward Silas. It let out a hiss that sounded like steam escaping a high-pressure valve, and it lunged up the scree slope toward Silas. Silas fired 3 more times, walking the heavy rounds into the creature's chest. It took the hits, stumbling, black blood pouring from its mouth, but it kept coming. It reached the top of the slope, its massive webbed hands grabbing Silas by the ankles. The grip was like a steel vise. It pulled, dragging Silas toward the edge. Silas kicked wildly, his boot connecting with the creature's snout, breaking the grip for a fraction of a second. He scrambled backward, raised the Magnum, and fired his last 2 rounds directly into its open, hissing mouth. The creature's head exploded in a shower of black brain matter and bone fragments. It went limp, sliding backward down the embankment and splashing into the black water of the pit. Silas hiked out and called it in. When the state police and DNR arrived, they looked at the creature's carcass, which was already sinking into the acidic water. They looked at Boone's mutilated body. The regional director told Silas it was a massive, mutated alligator gar that had gotten trapped in the mine and Boone had fallen and been attacked. Silas knew alligator gars don't have forelimbs. Gars don't bleed black and gars don't hiss. Silas signed the NDA. He quit the Park Service a month later. He lives in Cincinnati now, and he refuses to go anywhere near a body of water. Story 3. 6 rangers went into the Boundary Waters. A dogman ate 5 of them. Finally, we head to the deep, frozen boreal forest of the Boundary Waters canoe area, right on the Minnesota-Ontario border. It's millions of acres of unbroken, roadless wilderness. In November, the temperature drops to 10 below zero and the silence is so heavy it makes your ears bleed. The ranger in this account is Kalen. He was the lead field instructor for the regional SAR team. He was leading a squad of 6 into the deep backcountry for a 2-week winter survival test. Himself and 5 recruits: Briggs, Soto, Vance, Miller, and Hayes. They hiked 12 miles into a deep, isolated hollow and set up camp in a small clearing surrounded by dense black spruce. On the 3rd night, the temperature dropped to 10 below. They had a roaring fire going. Kalen was checking the perimeter when he noticed it. The woods went dead quiet. The wind died. The jays stopped screaming. The absolute heavy silence of the deep north fell over the camp. Then the smell hit them: wet dog, voided bowels, and raw meat. Hayes, the rookie, clicked on his high-lumen flashlight and swept the beam across the tree line. The beam caught a pair of eyes reflecting the light. They weren't round like a wolf's. They were forward-facing, and they were pale, almost yellow. Before Kalen could yell, the thing exploded out of the tree line. It bounded like a massive, muscular ape, covering 20 feet in a single leap. It hit Soto first. I need to be clear about what Kalen saw here because this is where the story becomes a slaughter. The thing didn't just bite Soto. It grabbed him by the waist with hands that had the grip strength of a hydraulic press, and it buried its face into his pelvis. Kalen heard the wet, heavy tear of fabric and flesh, followed by the sound of the femur snapping like a dry branch. Then, the thing stood up on its hind legs, shaking Soto's blood off its muzzle. It was 8 feet tall, covered in matted, dark gray fur, its chest and shoulders hairless and scarred. It didn't roar. It mimicked. It played back the exact sound of Soto screaming for help, but the cadence was wrong. It was a perfect, looping recording, coming from a throat that was 3 times the size of a man's. Briggs panicked. He pulled his sidearm, a 9mm, and fired 3 shots into the dark. 2 rounds hit the thing in the chest. It didn't even flinch. It turned its massive head, its jaws dripping with Soto's blood, and it lunged at Briggs. It caught Briggs by the throat and the shoulder. Kalen heard the sound of the collarbone shattering. The thing lifted Briggs entirely off the ground, its claws digging into his tactical vest, and it bit down on his face. The sound of the jaw crushing Briggs's skull was like stepping on a bundle of dry celery. The thing threw its head back, and the top half of Briggs's helmet and whatever was inside it came away in its mouth. The spray of arterial blood hit Kalen's face from 10 feet away. It was hot, and it smelled like iron and salt. Vance and Miller drew their hunting knives. It was a brave, stupid thing to do. The thing dropped to all fours and closed the distance in a blur of gray fur and muscle. It swiped at Vance, and its claws, which were at least 4 inches long, caught him across the stomach. It unzipped him from the ribs to the hip. Vance's intestines spilled out into the snow, steaming in the freezing air. The thing didn't even pause to eat Vance. It spun around and pounced on Miller. It pinned him to the ground, its front paws holding his arms down, and it began to eat him alive. Kalen said the worst part wasn't the screaming. It was the sound of the thing chewing. It was a wet, grinding sound like a garbage disposal full of bones. Kalen grabbed Hayes by the harness and screamed at him to run. They dropped their packs and sprinted into the dark, through the deep snow without flashlights, listening to the wet, tearing sounds behind them. They ran for 3 miles. About a mile from the truck, Hayes caught his boot on a root and went down hard. Kalen stopped, grabbed his arm, and tried to pull him up. That's when they heard it. the sound of heavy, four-footed footsteps crashing through the brush behind them, and then the voice. "Help me. My leg is broken," it said. Flat. Looping. It was Briggs's voice. Hayes froze. He looked back. Kalen didn't. Kalen yanked Hayes up, but Hayes was catatonic. Kalen let go of Hayes's arm and he ran. He heard Hayes scream, a real human scream, and then he heard the wet tear of flesh, and then silence. Kalen ran the last mile to the truck. He drove back to the district office, covered in blood that wasn't his. The extraction team went up at first light with the state police. They found the camp. The snow was painted black and red for 30 feet. They found Soto, his pelvis crushed and his lower half missing. They found Briggs, his skull caved in. They found Vance, bled out in the snow, and they found Hayes. His throat was torn out, and his chest had been opened up, his ribs cracked outward. They tracked the blood trail for 2 miles, and then it just stopped. The thing had carried its kill into the deep timber. They never found the bodies of the recruits it took. The official report, which Kalen signed, stated that a massive, hyper-aggressive grizzly bear had attacked the camp. The report claimed the recruits' firearms jammed and the bear mauled them. It was a lie. And everyone in the department who read the report knew it was a lie. But nobody said a word. Kalen knows grizzlies. Grizzlies don't have forward-facing yellow eyes. Grizzlies don't mimic human speech. And grizzlies don't have hands. Kalen quit SAR the next day. He moved to the suburbs of Minneapolis. He doesn't go north of Highway 2. And he never changed a word of it. 3 locations. 3 monsters. 3 survivors who know the truth. And a dozen victims who the authorities want you to believe were just victims of the elements. They want you to swim in the lakes. They want you to hike the mines. They want you to camp in the woods. But the rangers who were there know the truth. The map is just paper. The territory is real. And out there in the dark, something is always hunting. If you made it this far, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, join the Nightmare Zoo, and drop a comment below. Tell me which of these 3 nightmares would break you. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember, if the woods go quiet, you're not alone.